Hello again, I'm back for another review, and this probably isn't ever the best way to start a review, but I am going to start with an apology. I don't usually, well, I don't even now, I don't have a script of sorts in front of me, I never do, just a paper of key points I like to go over, but I'm going to apologize in case this sounds a little too rehearsed, because I know it always kind of annoys me when it sounds like something that's supposed to be a little free sounds like it's been said a million times. But this is the fourth or fifth time I've tried to record this. I tried to do it with another video editor, and I just ran into so many problems that I'm doing it the old way. So I'm sorry if the picture quality isn't that great, but this one's just much easier to use, so this is what I'll be sticking to. But moving forward, the show I'm reviewing this time is called Sekirei, and I'm not entirely sure what it says about me that this is the first review I'm doing that I've really, really liked. And I say this for one main reason, and anyone who already knows the show, or probably has even just heard of it, will probably know why. This show is rated mature, and it is rated mature for a reason. Back to the warning a little bit later. There are 2 seasons of Sekirei. The first one I watched a while ago, and the second one, which is titled Pure Engagement, I just finished recently with a friend. Not as recently as I usually finish shows before I make reviews, because, as I've mentioned, I've had to try multiple times to make this one, but that's beside the point. Before I get into the plot of where the story actually starts, I'm going to back up and give you a little background plot, just so the plot makes a little more sense. This top college student, really smart guy named Minaka Hiroto, traveled to this island where he found 108 beings. I guess technically they're aliens, but genetically they're alike to humans, and I don't want to make it sound really cheesy by saying they all have different superpowers, but that's kind of what it is. These 108 beings are known as Sekirei, and originally this discovery was known as the S-Plan. They were going to study these Sekirei and protect them pretty much. By the time that episode 1 occurs, this has morphed into the Sekirei plan, where all 108 of these beings have been released into this city that Minaka, or the Game Master, has pretty much taken over with MBI, this big company that he's built up. And the idea is that the Sekirei all have to find their Ashikabi and fight to the death. It's a last one standing wins type competition, a little like the Hunger Games, I guess, which I enjoyed, so that may be part of the pull of the plot for me. An Ashikabi is a human with the ability to empower Sekirei through, they call it mucosal contact, but in more simple terms, it's just kissing. And when this happens the first time, they call it emerging or being winged. It's kind of just like the full extent of their power has been unlocked for the first time, which is why it makes sense that they would want to find their Ashikabi if they have any plans of winning the game. The other half of winning, of course, is that the last one standing gets to stay with their Ashikabi. All the same, which another thing that's also kind of understandable, there are some that don't want to find their Ashikabi, which that point of view is understandable in that they don't really want to belong to someone else. And there are plenty of both. You get to see both types of personalities throughout the characters in this show, and it makes for a really nice mix. It's also important to note that an Ashikabi can have more than one Sekirei. There are plenty of Ashikabi running around the city who have multiple. They see it as if they have more of them, it's more likely that they can win the game. And though they don't really come right out and say it, but it's hinted pretty heavily at, even if 2 Sekirei have the same Ashikabi, eventually only one can win, and they'll have to fight each other. And I bring this up because the main character, Minato, by the end of Season 2, he has 6 Sekirei. Anyway, Episode 1 starts out with Minato Sahashi, who has just failed the entrance exam into college for the second time. And while he's wandering the streets all depressed about this, he runs into this girl. And by runs into, I mean she falls out of the sky and lands on him. This girl's name is Musubi, and she is a Sekirei, and the two other girls chasing her are Sekirei as well, but he doesn't find this out until later. All he really sees at first is a girl being chased by two other girls who are shooting lightning out of thin air. Not long after, Musubi explains the Sekirei plan to him, and whether he'd wanted to or not, Minato's life has pretty much just been taken over by it. But if there's one thing I really liked about this show, it was the characters. There were a lot of different personalities, because there's a lot of different characters, and I found them all pretty much to be likable in their own way. Musubi, while she may not be the most modest person in the world, almost can't be faulted for it, because she's so nice and naive, pretty much. And while Minato might not be naive, I would say he's kind of innocent. He's just a really good guy, I guess. He's not really one for violence, and he doesn't agree with the idea of the Sekirei game, but he genuinely wants to help all of the Sekirei that he comes across, which is a good trait for his own, as he has. I mentioned that some of them don't enjoy the idea of being winged and bound to another person, and two of his are like that, and I think it's probably a lot of what helped to win them over in the end. And I just realized that I kind of forgot to add in a spoiler warning at the beginning. I actually don't think I'm going to end up giving too much away, but here's where some of the stuff that you don't figure out until Season 2 comes into play in this review, but it's really not anything major. It's just another thing that I kind of liked about how all of the characters interact. There's these almost side plots where Minato's sister, Yukari, is also an Ashikabi, which is something that they're not aware of it, that they're both into this game. They both mention in separate parts during the anime that they kind of wish they had each other's lives because they're not stuck in this crazy game. And you figure out a little later on that Minato and Yukari's mother is helping to practically run the whole thing, and it just adds a nice spin on it. I've already mentioned that I like all the characters, and I don't want to ramble on about that for too long, but I also mentioned that by the end, when all 108 have been winged, Minato has 6 Sekirei, and not all Sekirei are female, but almost all of his are, and I say almost because I don't want to give too much away about Homura's character. In my opinion, he is one of the most interesting ones, and probably my favorite character. But anyway, it is a harem type thing, and I personally don't think it really went over the top, maybe because all of their personalities are so different. Each of the Sekirei has their own place in the story, and I mentioned before that they're all pretty much likable characters, so if that would bother some people, it didn't bother me. I think they played that off pretty well, and like I said, it helped that Minato was kind of innocent, I guess, if all this really perverted stuff was going on around him, and he was just this perverted guy willing to take advantage of every possible situation, this show wouldn't work as well as it does. Which is probably a good place to go back to that warning that I gave you earlier about how this show is mature for a reason. It's mostly really perverted humor, and I'm gonna draw back a little into my own mind. I used to be this really big fan of Dragon Ball Z, and I still am, pretty much. But even as a little kid, I noticed that all these people who were supposedly invincible, well, not to make this dirtier than it has to be, but they're invincible. Their clothes aren't. So as all these bombs are exploding around them and they're getting shot at, wouldn't it make sense that even if they're not harmed, their clothes would have the tiniest tear? Well, this show takes it to the other extreme. There is some actual fighting in this show, and attacks that would cause that tiny, tiny tear, have the ability to rip every stitch of their clothing off. And it is mostly mature because they do very little to censor, if they bother to censor at all. And I don't know if this overly bothers some of you, but the show is funny on its own. But if you watch it like I did, in my opinion, it's almost even better, because I watched all of those scenes, and it was kind of just ridiculous. And then watching it through the second time with my friend, it was even better, because we were watching all of this, finding it ridiculous, and making fun of things that I probably didn't even catch the first time. But the warning does have to be in there, because one of the OVAs, because I actually watched both of them for this show, they spend more time with their clothes off than they do with them on, which during certain episodes as well, this isn't so rare either. It's just something to keep in mind in case that sort of thing might bother you, or if you want to worry about whether or not you have to make sure that no one's home when you watch this show, because that's what I did the first time through. The first season can be found on Netflix, and the second one on the internet, and neither of those places exactly check your ID. So I don't pay much attention to ratings. This one's there for a reason, but I don't pay much attention to ratings, whatever they are. If you want to watch this, it's pretty easy to get your hands on. But for all the funny, perverted moments, there are deep, serious, heartfelt moments as well, which is nice. I watched this one in English, and I liked both of the openings. I didn't really watch the endings, I'll admit to that. But I liked both of the openings, the first one better than the other one. They're the type of openings that get stuck in your head. I know I listen to it, and I'm singing them for days, but that's just me. And in my opinion, all of the voice acting was really good, but if I had to pick a highlight, Chuck Huber as Minaka, or the Game Master, was really nice to hear, because he tends to be really good at voicing mad scientist types. And I think, though, I mentioned that Homura, or Kagari, depending on which name you want to use for him, was my favorite character, and maybe I am a little biased, but Leah Clark voiced him, and I think that was probably my favorite. I told you I wasn't going to give too much away about his character, but kudos to her, because there were times where I couldn't tell if Homura was supposed to be a girl or a boy, and I spent a lot of time just really listening, trying to tell if he was voiced by a girl or a boy. And it's important to his character, and it was just really nice to hear. As for whether it will continue, because both Season 1 and Season 2 leave off kind of at a cliffhanger, I can't say that I have very good news for that, or really that I can clear anything up. I've heard two different things about a Season 3, because the manga is still ongoing. One, I heard that the only reason that we don't have a Season 3 yet is because Season 2 caught up too quickly to the manga, and that we might be getting a Season 3 possibly very soon. But I've also heard that due to lack of interest, there may not be a plan for a Season 3 at all. And I don't know why, but I don't read manga online. It's just a hard habit to get out of, I guess. I don't know why. For whatever reason, I like to have the physical copy in my hand. And as much as I would love to know what's going on, unfortunately I don't think I'm going to break that habit for this. The only thing left really is recommendations, and I mentioned right from the beginning that I really liked this show, and the rating is the only reason that I feel kind of awkward just recommending this to anyone, because I'm sure there are people watching this who are younger than I am, and if you want to know the truth, I am not what they would consider old enough to be watching a mature show. As awful as this sounds, probably the worst advice you're ever going to get. I can't have liked this so much and not recommend it to someone else. So if you want to watch it as well and you're in the same situation I am, don't get caught. And if not, just enjoy. Thank you for watching.